Colorado, commissioner of the Department of Health. He is an incredible champion of public health, of our smoke-free movement. He comes to us as a former senator in the Kentucky state legislature and joined the department last year. We are lucky to have him and honored to have him here. Karen Pershing from the Metro Drug Coalition is here. She's done incredible work statewide, everything from tobacco to opioids, and she has some amazing insight to share with us today. Jeff Syracuse, a former Metro Council member in Nashville, current music commissioner for the Music, Film, and Entertainment Commission here in Nashville, and a personal story and champion of Smoke-Free Tennessee. He carried the smoke-free ordinance in Nashville that helped get rid of smoking inside 55 plus music venues and bars. And Dave Walker from the Tennessee National Guard and the Tennessee Counter Drug Task Force. We have some amazing guests today. I can't wait for this conversation we will have later. But just to give you the overall format of how we do this, in previous webinars you might be aware, but we have a spotlight section where we highlight some great work happening in the community. And Dave's work is going to be that spotlight session today in the National Guard. And then we will kick it to this panel discussion together. So as I started mentioning before here, this idea of champions, I want to make sure we know what we're talking about here, because it's Olympics week. I'm a former swimmer. I'm going to be glued to the TV watching some of these unusual and different champions that we think of, and the champions that are going for gold to represent our countries. But the champions we're talking about here are everyday champions. They are our police officers, our principals, our judges, our legislators, the folks that we want to get on board with our causes and help us drive forward our movements. In order to go from an idea or a problem to a solution, you need champions, and you need to build champions. And that's part of building relationships, how to message conversations, how to engage folks. And those are some of the important things. We have panelists today that are champions in their own right, and that every day are building champions for their work. And those are the kind of important conversations we're going to have today. So with that in mind, and framing up the conversation, we're going to kick it to our spotlight section. These are some of the examples of champions, from doctors to musicians, bartenders, law enforcement, just to give you an idea of all the champions that exist. Sometimes you don't think about some of these unusual and different partners that exist out there, that we can be forging relationships and building champions with to advance our work. All right, so the spotlight session today, like I mentioned, will be highlighting the great work of Dave Walker and the Counter Drug Task Force here in Tennessee that is through our own National Guard. Dave, I'm going to kick it to you. I'll be operating your slides, so just give me the next slide from there, and we will keep it rolling for you.
Will do. Jamie, I appreciate it. And guys, I really appreciate being here. It's an honor to be on this panel. I wanted to kind of start off by saying how, our involvement with Smoke-Free Tennessee, and we've been going on a little over a year now, I think, Jamie. And one of the things about champions and working in this arena that I've noticed, I was at the Montana Institute the other day. We're having this conversation about those challenging questions that you ask, and some of those detractors that can be out there. I used to be this guy that said, well, what does smoking have to do with drug prevention? That's really our focus, is drug prevention. And I was fortunate enough to be asked this question by one of my leaders the other day. And I got to explain to him, I said, Smoke-Free Tennessee and the idea of going all in on smoke prevention, when you look at all the data that lines up, smoke prevention, tobacco prevention is drug prevention. When you get a hold of a substance on the front end, you're so much more likely to have an addiction to that later on. And so I guess what I took from that conversation and being able to explain that to somebody is that those detracting voices can be your biggest champion. Those are all opportunities. Every time somebody says, well, why are you doing this? Well, that's just an opportunity to message. It's an opportunity to share that message And so in the spirit of creating champions, after explaining that and kind of going over some of the substance abuse prevention data that we've gathered over the years, we were able to turn that leader that was kind of a detractor on this into a champion locally there in the Guard. So my name's Dave Walker. I know I see a lot of familiar faces out here, and I really, or names at least. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So typically I'm a telecom and IT guy, but we and my team, I've got a full-time team of 4 of us that work in drug prevention in Tennessee. I'm going to go into a little bit about, what's the National Guard got to do with drug prevention here in a second. But we're trained civil affairs operators, and we get that training from the Army, and then we come in and we have gone to, we go to every CADCA. We're involved with Prevention Alliance Tennessee. We're SAPS-T qualified. We're trained the trainer qualified on SAPS. We do a lot of prevention, but we're not the prevention expert. The prevention experts, let me see here. Yeah, the prevention experts, are out in the community. They're already there. What we do in our niche really is team building and process, right? So I think most folks are familiar with, the military's ability, to get things done. Sometimes it costs a little bit extra money, but we definitely get it done. So we're the team builders in the process, folks. So we take the best practices out there and share them with the community. So we'll go into that next slide there. I think I lost the slide. Not sure.
Well, Dave, let me make sure that is in there for you.
Yeah, my view changed all of a sudden.
All right. Hold on.
But I'll keep rolling while you're doing that, because I've got them pulled up here elsewhere too. But so why are we involved in this? Again, citizen soldiers. Every one of us in the Guard are citizens first, and then also trained as soldiers through the Army and the Air Force. So it is a joint program. What are some of the initiatives? I just noticed the time there is already 12:13. DDR initiatives, and what do we do? The reason why we're doing this, if you look at that second slide with the continuum of care, that is something that I like to explain, particularly with soldiers and airmen and military folks, is prevention is the same thing that we do when we're in a deployed environment. We're trying not to wait until the flashbang. If you want to go to that next one with the continuum of care, Jamie, we try not to wait for that impact moment of, something going wrong, right? So something going wrong. We want to get out left of the bang and start working instead of waiting until, an IED or something explodes on the road. You want to go to the fertilizer store and find out, hey, who's getting all this fertilizer? Maybe we limit the amount of fertilizer somebody's getting. It's the same process that we use in prevention. Is how do we affect that environmental policy? How do we get the community involved and affect the things before something goes horribly wrong? So that next slide is just the end of what I run through with my military folks. Is, do you want to work on the right side of this continuum, or do you want to work on the left side? Because I'll tell you, the left side is a lot safer, it's a lot cheaper, and it's a lot more effective if you can stop things from happening instead of having to address things after they go wrong. So the next slide I've got there is just some of the arenas that we work in: environmental strategies, coalition capacity building, and direct services. Some of you are familiar with our Stashed Away trailer. That's where we don't train the community, but we bring that trailer to the coalitions and let them train the community, because they're the substance abuse and prevention experts. What we do is bring the tools and bring the process, but we really work in this coalition capacity building arena. So we do a lot of working with new coalitions. We've got 28 now that are starting up around the state that are not state funded. State has around 50, depending on how you're counting right now. And so our partners at the state, Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, they have a lot of partners that they're funding and working with. And so what we've been asked to do is kind of work with the startup, the fledgling coalitions. And we have a process to kind of walk them up the ladder using the Prevention Alliance Tennessee, the toolkit, as well as information from CADCA and everywhere else, and just bringing that information to them and then connecting those communities and community members with resources. So I want to do a time check, Jamie, because I know it's already 12:15. I've only got a couple more slides yet, but I don't want to take up too much. I'd rather, I know we want to get to the panelists as well.
You're okay, Dave. We usually build in a few extra minutes on the back end, so you're doing just fine.
Well, I'll finish this part up just by I wanted to highlight some of our partners here on the next one. And this is really just to say, this is if you're not familiar with us, then you can talk to these folks about us. We have lots of partners, and I know I've left out a ton of partners. These are 4 of our state partners that we work with on a regular basis. And again, that's Tennessee Department of Mental Health Substance Abuse, the TBI, directly with a lot of them. We've got a lot more than 4 folks in counter drug for the National Guard. Most of them work directly with law enforcement and directly with the TBI, HIDAs, and such as that. But they don't get out there as much. What we do, we have 4 of us that work specifically in prevention with local civilian governments. We work with local coalitions. We work with stakeholders in the community, right? But through the lens of those coalitions and that team building. And of course, Prevention Alliance Tennessee is like our coalition of coalitions for Tennessee, saying very, on par with Smokefree Tennessee. Smokefree, you guys, I mean, since we've been involved with Smokefree, we've been able to get involved with some environmental changes, the Tennessee Leadership Academy came in. We're working on some policy regarding smoking and anti-smoking across the state. So that's been a really good opportunity working with Smokefree. And then, of course, Tennessee Alliance for Drug Endangered Children. So the next thing right here, the troop to task, this is just an idea of where we're at and where we're going. Right now, we have the 2 offices in Middle Tennessee, and we just started one up out in East Tennessee, that yellow dot there. So we've got an office out there that we're hoping to maintain going into next year. And then we've got we've started to get some attention at the national level to be able to adjust our funding. We've kind of been losing through attrition over the past several years. We all understand, the budget and the money thing. But what we're trying to do and what we expect to do over the next few years is to expand out into East and West Tennessee, whereas we've had kind of a foothold in Middle Tennessee for a long time. But as we get some new folks brought on and trained, we expect, I would say, the next 2 to 5 years expanding out into that East and West. And the last couple of slides here is really the how-to. So we developed this several years ago, and this was based on the best knowledge we had at the time. This is the Tennessee National Guard Coalition Roadmap. This has since gone on to be a national template for how a lot of our DDRO programs, DDRO being drug demand reduction and outreach programs for the Guard, build coalitions. So this is just this is not formal or school taught necessarily. This is something that we developed as a guideline and a framework to move coalitions from no coalition planned or established all the way up to where they're presenting at higher levels and creating evidence-based practices. Of course, we don't do that. We're just helping everybody get to the next level as we can, particularly with the newer coalitions. And then the last slide is the glide path. And this is something this is the part that I really would like to share with the community here, because this is something that took me a long time to kind of put together and think about is how are we doing that in the community, right? All those little boxes all the way up, those are things that either the local coalition can do to be successful, moving up the ladder. There's things that we can come in and help facilitate to the extent that we have the capacity. Everybody deals with that. But this process right here on the front end, getting the DFC, our goal is to get a brand new coalition along with Prevention Alliance Tennessee, kind of moving in that direction towards being able to apply for a DFC grant and be sustainable. So this is kind of our mentality on it right now is trying to get those first few steps taken care of to secure some local funding or opioid abatement council funding or some type of funding to get a coalition started, but basically get like a grant writer or a data collector, an epidemiologist working on the data, so they can put together enough info in order to apply for that DFC grant, right? And so Prevention Alliance Tennessee is really leading the way on that process and has the toolkit available for coalitions. And then we tend to be the boots on the ground that go get that toolkit in people's hands and then walk them through that process. So like I said, we've got a lot of partners, but once they go through that DFC, that could be 5 to 10 years worth of grant funding. And then after that, we definitely want them to be in touch with the state of Tennessee for that long-term sustainable funding. So that's kind of our idea on it, and what we've worked out with our partners. I'm not saying that this is not necessarily a formal plan. This is just how we see it based on all the input that we've gotten from our partners so far. So anyway, that's how we do it and kind of why we're in the community doing it. Our contact info is there on the back. I like those Gmails because that tends to get to us a lot easier than our military emails. But that's kind of what we do and why we do it in the community.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dave. That's amazing work. There was a question or two in the chat that I wanted to toss your way before we move forward. Someone wants to know, how do they schedule the trailer to come to their community?
Hey, I appreciate that. Yeah. So if you look on that TNNG Will, he's our primary contact. Now, I will say that we do require you go through your local coalition. And so we're working on a better process to get with the coalitions, because our whole intent with the Stashed Away trailer and the whole program for Stashed Away, we don't have a lot of capacity to go and work for every health department, school system, coordinated school health. We would love to, but we don't have that capacity. So what we try to use it for is to establish those connections with the local coalitions, because we've been sharing with local coalitions on how to build their own. So some are able, some are not, but you may find a way to build one of these in your own community. And it's, there's no copyright on IP or anything like that. It's just, hey, this is a good idea. A lot of people need it. So I would say contact Will, but if you are not a coalition, contact your local coalition. If you don't know about your local coalition, contact me or Will, and then we'll put you in contact with your local coalition. And in that way, you've got a local prevention trained person providing that education, because we are not the drug prevention experts. We're the team building experts, and we have tools that we'll bring out, but we would really like to put the coalitions in touch with their communities.
I love that. And someone just asked, how do they find out who their contact person is through you guys in their area for their coalition?
Great question. Appreciate it. So we used to be organized by region, so we don't do that anymore. You can just contact any one of us, right? We'll point you in the right direction. So all those email addresses right there, hit me up. I'll put you in the right, basically. So Empathy Gearin, if you met Empathy, she works with all of our grassroots coalitions, those 28 that are brand new anywhere between 2 people on up to a whole coalition full. And then Will Johnson, TNNG Will, works with all of our established coalitions that are state funded. But you can hit me up and I'll point you in the right direction. Too easy.
Love that. And we will include those 4 contacts in our follow-up email from this webinar. Every webinar, we follow up the next day with a recording of the webinar, as well as key contact info or any assets that will be shareable. So we'll make sure everyone gets that and can contact accordingly. Awesome. Well, trying to keep on schedule. I know we had a little some technical difficulties, might have threw us off a little bit, but we're back. And we're gonna get going here to our panel section, which we're really excited about this conversation with Dr. Ralph Alvarado, Karen Pershing, Jeff Syracuse, and Dave is going to stay on for this conversation as well. So the way I like to format this is I'm going to have a question, and then I will kick it to each of you for your own particular thoughts or perspective on it. And I will direct who goes, just to keep things rolling smoothly, because I know it can get a little squirrely sometimes on Zoom. So the first question is just tell us, this is more of a softball, but tell us a bit about the various hats that you have worn in the last 5 years as a champion for your particular work or something that you really believed in. Dr. Alvarado, you are first on my screen, so I will kick it to you to kick things off.
Great, thanks. It's great to be with everybody here today. Hopefully you can hear me well. bit about me. I'm a physician. I'm in internal medicine, pediatrics is my specialty. I'm a father of two great kids. I'm a husband to my wife for 30 years now. A man of faith, I think, and um, found myself in a world of politics unexpectedly. It's a long story, so I won't bore everybody with the details. But once I got in, I was a physician, and ultimately, at my core, that's what I am. Everything I do is through that lens. So I had a lot of work on the legislative process as a state legislator, also through budgeting, and working on how to budget things when it comes to Medicaid oversight, different things when I was in Kentucky. Since I've come to Tennessee, really an opportunity that I've got a great staff. I think a lot of them were worried that I was just a routine politician coming into a role. And I think they quickly realized, at least through my passions, that I'm a public health guy. Also, want to see Tennessee really improve from its ranking of being 44th overall. Things that are important for me, and things that I believe in: age-friendly public health systems. People are aging in our state. We've got a lot of people out there that we're not really ready as a state to accommodate a lot of the folks. Dementia coming on, it's one of the leading causes of death. And as folks get older, there's a lot of issues on social determinants, both with food insecurity, housing, lots of things like that. In my role, I've been to every county in the state. I've been to all the health departments. I've met with most of our legislators, met with all of our commissioners, and really had a chance, as I've been in that role, to listen to a lot of ideas from our own staff in our health departments, things that we could be doing better. And then also trying to redo our mission, vision, values for our department, and then just trying to get from them the things that we should be working on. And really, tobacco is one of those things that I think we're going to hopefully make a little bit of a push this year. We're going to see if we're successful with it. Also, it's important, like you said, that leadership isn't always come from somebody who's in a position of perceived authority. Leadership comes in lots of different ways. We've got lots of stories of how we've used little kids, junior high kids, adults, legislators, who people would not expect to come with different angles and things. But leadership comes in lots of different shapes, sizes, and positions. So it's really important for us as we have this conversation to keep that in mind.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alvarado. That's great stuff. Karen, I'll kick it to you to answer that same question about some of the work you've been doing over the last few years as a champion and something you really believed in.
Sure. Thank you for letting me participate. I feel very honored. I have been with Metro Drug Coalition for 14 years now, served as the executive director until April, and kind of stepped back, needed to breathe a little bit and have a little less responsibility, but I'm still here working. But when I came in 2010, the opioid crisis was really first and forefront in what we were dealing with. And of course, Dave mentioned coalitions, which we are one of those many coalitions across the state that really try to engage grassroots stakeholders in substance misuse prevention work. And so one of the things that we do on an annual basis with our anti-drug coalition is we do an advocacy session with one of our coalition meetings. And in that session, we just give them some basic tools and strategies around how to engage with elected officials, how to make your voice heard. So that's kind of the grassroots piece of what we do. Because of the fact that we use a public health model in the community coalition work that we do, I had been trained in public health, fortunately, and had experience actually working in the public health system for many years before I came here. So I kind of had a little bit of a leg up, understanding the whole environmental strategy process that Dave mentioned. So again, just learning and understanding that, like you mentioned, Jamie, that champions come in all shapes and sizes, and it's just harnessing that passion, getting people all on the same page and getting them all going in the right direction. And it's just been an honor, and it continues to be an honor for me to serve here and to work with many fine folks across the state.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for all that amazing work. Jeff, you're next on my screen, so I will kick the mic to you.
Thanks, Jamie. It's great to be here. So I've always seen myself as somebody who is somewhat of a jack of all trades, master of none. And that bodes well for wearing many hats for whatever initiatives and things that I'm involved with. I have a Bachelor of Music from MTSU where I studied piano. I went back and got my MBA. I've worked at BMI over the past over 25 years now, and I've had probably 9 different jobs working at BMI, where I manage radio and television licensing now. And then over the course of the last about 25 years or so, I fell into neighborhood and community organizing, nonprofit leadership. That led to getting involved in elected office, where I served here in the Donaldson area for 8 years on Metro Council, and where I've really felt that wearing many hats and the many different kind of skill sets that I've had over the past 25 years has really come to be a need is as Nashville's rapid growth and development has happened, which has been a success as a city. The dual-edged sword there is that it's been very difficult for our working creatives to not just survive, but thrive. And in my 25 plus years working at BMI, understanding the complexities of federal copyright law, how that translates to how it impacts the working songwriter and musician here in Nashville, there was a calling of sorts as I got elected in 2015 and Nashville continued to grow. And we saw some struggles within our music industry and our working creatives, be it our local independent music venues, quality of life issues like what we talked about here with the Smokefree Tennessee and protecting our hospitality workers and musicians. Wearing many hats, I think, is more and more important in life as life seems to become more and more complicated. So I've found a success in taking all those hats into finding good causes that have brought some results, whether that's, again, supporting things like local independent music venues, which is not a creative issue at all, really. It's a real estate issue. So it's understanding things like zoning and codes and planning and stormwater and all these different kind of aspects that go into development, historic preservation, things like that, that then drive results. So wearing many hats is something I've definitely been accustomed to and do enjoy over the past more than 2 decades now.
I love that, Jeff. Thank you so much. As someone who also enjoys wearing many hats, I can relate. Dave, since you just did the spotlight section and kind of gave us the full run of what you do, I'm going to start the next question with you here, which is a little more specific in terms of the lens, but can you give us an example, Dave, of how you created a champion within your job that helped you and advance something very specific?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I was actually thinking about that with my boss, and that question about the tobacco. You know, hey, why are we involved with tobacco if it's legal? Well, that's the beginning of this, right? And so what I found is that being able to have those voices, and I'm one of them, by the way. I'm always a detractor. I'm always like, okay, yeah, but sure, I'm that guy. I grew up on a tobacco farm, right? So I used to pick up leaves in the field, So I mean, I'm the guy that you've got to convince on most things when it comes to this stuff. I'm not a public health major. But so the creating. Specifically as far as creating those champions, I have found that going into, I've not created any. I think we established the parameters and the conditions for that, right? Like listening to other folks and understanding what they're concerned about is number one. One of the very specific examples I'll give is, and I'll give a shout out to Cannon County, small 15,000 folks, and I'm one of them there. But our local judge, Judge Cowan, saw what we were doing with the local coalition there and jumped in on wanting to do a drug prevention or a recovery court, right? Like just having that space to have people come in and feel comfortable talking about this and getting to learn this language and this understanding of health and public health. Our judge jumped on and was able to find some funding. Our folks in the coalition actually found him the funding and was able to get one started there, and they have great success. And I believe we either just graduated our first class or right about to. And these are folks that are, we're just creating more champions. When people succeed, we've got more champions. Right now, they can come back and advocate. So that's probably my specific example.
I love that. I love that. And I think that, someone might not think of a judge as a champion in prevention work. But that's a relationship that's important and created that space for you locally, and just something for folks to think about across the state. Dr. Alvarado, I'll kick it to you in terms of a specific example of creating a champion in your work.
A few, and they're small. Some of them are in my practice. I always use the example when I was in the first grade. I was a young kid. I was probably 5 years old, and I was kind of early in my school studies. But Mrs. Therimian, who's my first grade teacher, this is back in the 70s, so 1975, 76, somewhere in there, brought in a pack of cigarettes to school, something you wouldn't be allowed to do today, but brought in a handkerchief, took out a pack of cigarettes, took a cigarette out, lit it, took a drag, and blew and exhaled through the handkerchief and showed the brown stain that left behind and said, "This is what happens to your lungs if you smoke." And that, here I am, 54 years of age. I remember it like it was yesterday, watching that happen. Made a huge impact for me. No desire to smoke because I didn't want that in my lungs. Something as simple as that, which you just think is one little anecdote, but if those happen everywhere and kids see that, those kind of things stick in your head. That's an example of a champion. Didn't get on any coalition or do any work, but probably influenced 30 kids in her class, 25 kids in her class that day. And I don't know how many of them were like me, but we didn't forget. I think about when I was in the legislature in Kentucky, we had a group of junior hires from Johnson County, Kentucky, who got tired of vapes and Juul vapes and got together, and their legislator reached out and they proposed a bill that they wanted to do that was going to, hopefully make it harder for kids to get Juul and to get vaping and all those stuff. And they came into the state capitol and got in front of committees and had an opportunity to present their bills. And I think ours was the first one in the Senate that presented their bill for us. Got a lot of media attention, a lot of hype, because they were 12 and 13-year-olds who were coming and talking about the impact in their classroom. And it got, I think, even some national attention. Got through the Senate, passed, got all the way to the House, and in the end, didn't quite get past the finish line, which made them very disappointed. But then afterwards, a lot of awards from the legislature to recognize their efforts. Again, that's going to continue to get enough attention that they're willing to stand forward. It made other kids, at least in their school, realize, hey, these kids put their necks out there and got a lot of attention for that, and lots of other bills that we've been able to get done. So, even sometimes just empowering someone. I told the story of a little girl I had a guy I had in my medical practice who I saw every quarter, COPD, was getting ready to go on oxygen. He was about 60 years old, kept smoking. I said, "Man, you're killing yourself. What do you do? Why don't you quit?" Doc, I know that's your job. Just give me my inhalers. I'll be okay. And he kept blowing me off. I'm in a small town, and 5-year-old granddaughter came in to see me. Probably a HIPAA violation, but I remember telling her when she was in with her mom, who was his daughter, and said, I just saw your papa in here a couple of weeks ago. He's starting to get pretty sick. You could probably ask him to quit smoking for me. And I warned her, she's getting really sick. He's having a hard time. Next time I saw that guy, he had finally quit smoking for 3 months. I said, "Man, what happened?" "Well, my 5-year-old granddaughter was thinking I was going to die, so he quit smoking for her." And I tell people that guy was unwilling to smoke, unwilling to quit for himself, for his own health, for his longevity, for his wife, for his kids. But that 5-year-old little girl had him wrapped around her finger. He would do anything for her. And that's the champion that got that man, probably saved and extended his life for several years as a result of that. So you can find, again, champions, all shapes, sizes, ages, of any type, sometimes just to influence someone else, because there's always a way to get to somebody. It may not be through the traditional means that we've been used to, advertising and influencing people, but you can find someone to touch that person who they'll be willing to quit for that other person, even if it's not for themselves sometimes. And so it's just finding who that person can be and finding a way to touch that individual. And again, it can come from a teacher talking to kids. It can come from all levels and sizes. You'll never know what sticks with someone and how that cascades down the line and makes an influence to others as well.
Powerful stories, powerful champions. Thank you so much for sharing. Karen, we'll kick it to you to talk about a specific story you can think of.
Okay, Dr. Alvarado, you got me thinking way back here too. It took me back to high school. Of course, when I was in high school, kids could smoke at school. I mean, that's when you think about that. Again, I'm 60 years old now, so some of you on here may go, gosh, that would never happen at my school. But it did, and they moved the smoke hole, what they called the smoke hole, the smoking area, right in the front of the school one year. And so being the quiet, I was very quiet and introverted as a teen. I put a petition together to move the smoke hole. So I got all these fellow students to sign the petition, took it to the principal, and had a suggestion of where it should be moved, and ended up through that advocacy effort, we ended up moving that. And everyone was happy, with the change. So again, I think about that and doing that early on, I think really gave me an opportunity to understand that you can raise your voice and that you can make a difference. But in thinking about where I'm working now, of course, several pieces of legislation kind of came out of our coalition that were impactful around the opioid crisis. And in one instance in particular, when the fetal assault law was a law for 2 years, where women could be charged with misdemeanor if they had a baby who was born with neonatal abstinence syndrome or other problems due to the mother's drug use. And so it created just a lot of problems with women seeking care and seeking treatment because they were afraid they were going to get arrested. So it had a 2-year sunset on it. Well, I met a young woman, again, through a legislator. So she and her mother had gone to Nashville. He knew I was very passionate about this issue, so he connected me with them. We literally talked on the phone from the time they left Nashville until they got back to their home in Blount County. And the story was amazing. It was fascinating. And I said, we got to do something about this. We've got to get this law to go away. So, of course, with the 2-year sunset provision, we had some time to work on it. But this young woman was incredibly strong and amazing. She went with me. We went and met with every legislator on that committee when it was time to sunset. And we were able to have success. But just watching her be able to handle some backlash and some, venom, to be honest with you, from individuals, and to watch her rise above that was just absolutely amazing. Senator Briggs, so when Senator Briggs first became a senator for the state of Tennessee, I knew him at first as a commissioner, Knox County Commissioner. So he had been to our annual legislative breakfast and had gotten some information from me. He was driving to Nashville his first year, and he had spent some time in the doing some surgery that weekend. He's a cardiovascular surgeon, and he had seen a couple of very young patients who had blown out their valves due to drug use. So he calls me. It's like, Karen, I didn't realize how bad this was. And so he's like, send me all this data. I need data. I need information. So I get back to the office. I said, I'll send you everything I have. So when I came to visit him in Nashville, he was like, remembered all of that data and all that information. And to make a long story short, he's become a huge champion around prevention, but also trying to make sure people have access to services, especially treatment services. But he's also sponsored a lot of our tobacco legislation since he became a senator. So we appreciate him. He's always willing to, get a little dirty in that work and try to push something that may not be popular, or to at least have conversations. And some of those things we're still trying to get through. But probably the biggest thing that's happened over the last few years in terms of tobacco legislation is the fact we got it moved out of the Ag Committee into Health, which is where it belonged. So we couldn't get anything passed because we couldn't get it out of the agricultural committee, subcommittees. So just being able to, again, reposition that issue as a public health issue and not a agricultural issue, I think has been extremely important.
I love that, Karen. And yeah, at the heart of what I hear a lot of y'all saying is that stories are something that really helps create champions. And whether that's a personal story or a larger story, I can attest to that personally. Even with folks on this call, and how I got into this space to begin with was sharing my story as a musician with asthma, battling a smoke-filled venue, and that story was, well, what got people, to become a champion of our movement, of eventually this coalition. And I'll give a plug to our other webinars too. Our last one was on storytelling, and we have all of our webinars up on our resources page on the Smokefree Tennessee website to go, because these two subjects kind of overlap in a really interesting way. But anyway, I'll kick it to Jeff to give an example of a champion creating on your side.
Sure. Thanks, Jamie. When I think of a recent example of proactively trying to create a champion, was my successor. So I spent 8 years in office, and I did work proactively to groom who I thought would be the community's best choice, and thankfully they did choose him. One of the first leadership lessons that I ever learned, that I've always taken to heart, and I still always remember this, is that the minute that you take a leadership role, prepare for the day that you will leave it. If you want to keep a particular initiative going beyond you, you have to make sure that you have good succession planning. I encourage everybody to listen to a podcast that's done out of the James Baker Public Policy Center out of the University of Tennessee of Knoxville, from two former governors, one Democrat, Phil Bredesen, one Republican, Bill Haslam. Governor Haslam said something that's always stood with me. He said, politics is the enemy of strategic planning. And it rings so true for me. There are so many initiatives that I was involved with, both whether it was the chair of public health and safety on Metro Council, whether it's Donaldson's new $20 million library that we finally just cut the ribbon on, whether that is the Donaldson Station, the first transit stop of the WeGo Star outside of downtown that we've been so far spending 15 years on recreating that station into a walkable village. All of those things that I built, I had to make sure to create a champion so that as I left my role, somebody could pick it up and not have to start from scratch on certain things. So the takeaway is that leadership, and especially obviously in elected office, is temporary. So always be prepared to create your champion so that as you build an initiative, you can pass that on to somebody else to keep it going. And you can sit back and say, mission accomplished, because you did your part to keep building it, but you also built the champions of the future to keep it going.
I love that so much. That's great. That's great. And it's so funny because I was just thinking, of this as the building up of something, but also not the building forward of something. And that's a great way to frame it on both sides of the hill, kind of. If anyone has any questions, I've got one more question that we're going to pose to everybody, but I wanted to give some space in case anyone on the webinar wants to drop a question in there. I'll give it a second here, or if y'all drop it in here, we can come back to it at the end. But just kind of wanted to make sure folks had that opportunity. But my last question here is again, I'm trying to start wide and get more specific here. But for folks on the webinar, what's the first step that people can do in building a champion? If say they have an initiative and they want to, whether it's with a legislator or with a school principal or with a judge or with a council member, what's that first thing to do? Sometimes it can be intimidating to try to tell your story to someone that might seem like they are in a greater position of power or might not care. So, Dr. Alvarado, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, so there's lots of steps, and it depends on where people are at sometimes. I mean, some people are, like you said, some are very intimidated. They want to be involved. They don't know how. For me, it's, I talk a lot because I'm a physician. I'm used to giving a lot of explanations, but really, I find you have to listen first, like everybody should. And so, as a doctor, as a health commissioner, as you listen to other people and find out where they're at, I think that's the first step. Some people, if they're just beginning, sometimes it's finding a way to empower them. And sometimes it just takes reassurance, encouragement, helping, kind of getting directly involved. There are others who are much further along. And so sometimes what leadership sometimes is for me, is often just connecting people together. I often talk about the Department of Health being the party planners of state government. We tend to bring a lot of groups together. I've often told my own team that, I don't really care who gets credit for work that we do. I don't care if it's a nonprofit, I don't know if it's another department. A lot of people take a lot of pride and ownership in that work. Obviously, our department takes a lot of pride and ownership. This is kind of in our wheelhouse. But if it means that someone else or another organization gets the credit and gets to do it, we'll come along as, just to assist and help them achieve that. So you have to listen first, find out where that person is. Do they just need a connection to make them bigger and more able to get what they've got done? And sometimes giving them credit and doing that will do that. Other people, it's just a matter of listening to see if they need to get started. It's a matter of encouragement and trying to provide those resources for them that way, or bringing them in the fold and saying, let's work on something together. But like any of us, all of us like to hear something positive said about ourselves. And I think particularly with young people, they're under a lot of pressure right now when it comes to vaping, tobacco use. A lot of them are scared to speak out for fear of ridicule, fear of embarrassment. They're at a time in their life when it's difficult. If they're willing to step out and speak out on something that's important, is to provide encouragement, recognition of the work they're doing. And the more that you can do that, people kind of feed off of that energy is what I find a lot of times. So if you can find passion, fuel that passion, that breeds more passion from others, and it becomes contagious. That's what I've always done, is you listen first, and how do you help this person, is that then that kind of forces a lot of different things, what you have to do to get them moving. Like I said, sometimes it's just finding what's the motivation to get that person up and over that hump. But I just find that a lot of people get very nervous about being vocal on issues that are important, because at certain ages of your life, it's not cool, or they're worried about being perceived differently by friends. And that's who I always think of. Champions right now are young people that need to, go out there and they can see this. They're going to be the most effective voices in a generation that's really hooked on vaping with really bad outcomes. So that's what I always say to do. Listen first, and then from there, figure out what path to send them down.
I love that. And that to me is a good opportunity to plug the TN Strong program and movement within the Department of Health. That I was just at the TN Strong Summit a few days ago and watching 500 kids that are being given that confidence and that encouragement and those the educational tools to go out there and create more champions within their schools was a really powerful thing, an inspiring thing for me personally.
And I'll tell you, we're looking at really, there's some opportunities. We're even looking at how do we continue to grow that. Offering kids who get involved as encouragement at things, even like considering scholarships potentially for the future. We're exploring that kind of stuff with kids who are involved in those movements. But we had a sold out conference last week. We're really excited about how that's growing. And again, a lot of the kids these days, everything's very visual, everything's on TikTok, everything's on social media. Sometimes some graphic images of what happens to people goes a long way to impact folks. And if they see that, they go, I didn't realize. So a lot of great work being done with our youth ambassadors. We're really excited about that.
Through that. Absolutely. All right. Dave, I'll kick it to you here on what do you think the first step is?
So forgive me for just agreeing with Dr. Alvarado. I'm going to start with listening. I'll build on that, though. So I've been in telecommunications and communications in general for 25 years. That's really that is really my area of expertise, if I have one, starting out with radios and coordinating operations for a CAV unit back in the day. We used to fight the Russians, believe it or not, back 20 something plus years ago. But as far as communications and listening, I find it's important to add caring to that next piece, right? So listening is very important, and I think that is the first step. That's the first step. But if I was going to build on that, I would say next step is to care, and I learned that from. I've actually been a non-commissioned officer a lot longer than I've been a parent, but my kids just kind of reinforce this with me. Listening to soldiers and listening to airmen and understanding the problem is one. Caring is harder because I only have the capacity to care about so much. There's a lot of things that are going wrong. So I tell folks all the time, I was like, hey, I don't care about that. You know, I said, it's not that it's not important. Don't get me wrong. I just can't care about it. I have a limited amount of things to care about. So I think the next step for me is really caring about what somebody is saying, and really, because what that does for me when I care is that engages a part of my brain that I'm not able to use, and that's the solutions part. So when I care about what my kids say, right? Like, so I care about that every day. And so when my kids say something and I slow down enough to listen, the good news is I already care because I do care about what they say. But that engages a part of my brain where I'm able to start engineering solutions. So as a telecom guy, as a guy that's got to come up with signal paths and things like that, and get my team to do that, I find that listening to the customer, doing customer support, listening to soldiers, listening to kids, listening to people, listening to your local sheriff, listening to your local judge. What do they care about? You're probably not going to change their mind, guys. Like, people are in these positions because they care. And so if we spend more time caring about what they care about and finding out where we can line up instead of trying to change minds, I really think that positive direction will get us a lot further down the line. So I'm going to go with caring as step 2.
I love that. I love that. So spot on. Karen, you got step 3? Just kidding.
Well, yeah, these comments are great. So I was actually believe in relationship building, and it really piggybacks on what the other 2 presenters have already mentioned. So it's caring, it's listening, but it's also establishing a trusted relationship where you can be open and honest, and you may not line up exactly right, but what are some things you can agree on, right? And how do you move forward with those things? So again, I think trust is a huge issue too. So as you're building a relationship, it's got to be built on mutual trust and understanding in order for it to be impactful, especially when you're trying to create champions. I love what our kids are learning. Again, we have a youth coalition, and when we take that youth coalition in to visit elected officials, the attentiveness compared to if I was talking versus those teens talking to them, it's definitely there's a difference. They want to hear from them. And so I think the more we can engage younger people to become champions, I think we can create an environment where you've got more and more people willing over the next generation to really step out and really coalesce around things that are important to them.
Amen to that. I love it. I love it. Jeff, kick it to you to number 4.
Dr. Alvarado reminded me of a quote from Harry Truman, who said, "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit," right? And so I think my comments would basically piggyback off of what our other 3 panelists have said. The phrase that comes to mind is coalition building. I've always walked in rooms as a local legislator, never believing that I was the smartest guy in the room. I've always said, I'm full of ideas. I'm not saying that they're all good ones. So I think that coalition building to empower other people, educate them about the particular initiative that you're trying to create a champion or champions for, it's critical to have coalition building, because some of those folks in your coalition for your particular cause, they may rise to become like the ultimate champion of a particular cause, something that you're passionate about, you may kick it to somebody else and wow, they've really taken it to a new level. And I've experienced that as well. I was involved in a nonprofit here in Donaldson, which was called Hip Donaldson. Started out as a Facebook group, became a bona fide nonprofit. If you type in HIP to a Facebook page, there's now HIP pages throughout all of Middle Tennessee, from HIP Gallatin, HIP Murfreesboro, HIP Bellevue, and HIP Donaldson was the first one. Well, I was one of the 3 first guys that helped start that, but our very first president took it to a whole new level. So we built a coalition, we created champions, but within that coalition, we found somebody that never in our wildest imaginations did we think that it would be taken to the level that it did. So I think coalition building is critically important to this as well.
I love that. I love that. And I can personally agree on that front in terms of building this coalition and all of the different folks that got involved in this, you know, from a musician to a public health partner to a legislator, a business, and everyone in between. That's in order to do that, you have to listen and care, just like everyone mentioned. I'll add an anecdote that a mentor of mine in college once told me, and I've applied it across the board throughout life in various ways. But if you ask for a favor, if you lead with that, you're probably going to get advice. But if you ask for advice as the first step, you might end up with them doing a favor for you. And coming in and expecting or demanding something out the gate oftentimes gets walls put up. Whereas if you just try to engage with a conversation and get advice and get people invested in it that way, then you never know where it's going to lead. And oftentimes it leads to a place greater than you even thought. So that's for my personal, and just as a very, very specific thing, oftentimes people ask me, how do you engage with musicians on this front? And how do you get them involved in issues that maybe aren't just music, right? Like public health. And the first thing I'll always say is take them to lunch. So that's a very practical first step, but a lot of times people think with their bellies as well. And with a full belly, they're really excited to support. Anyway, I know we're a couple minutes over. I really, really appreciate this amazing conversation. The comments pouring in the chat have been nothing but positive, and it's been inspiring for me, inspiring for a lot of people on this call. Thank you for lending us your time, your wisdom, your insight. It means the world. This will be recorded and shared. We will follow up in an email tomorrow also to announce our next 4 webinar themes were voted on by everybody. They're amazing. It's going to be starting, I believe October will be the next one. And so keep coming back. Let's keep these conversations going. Let's keep building this coalition with new and amazing people. Thank you for everyone for taking time today, including especially the panelists, Dr. Ralph Alvarado, Karen Pershing, Jeff Syracuse, and Dave Walker. Thank you all for your service and your time, and we will see you on the next one. Cheers, y'all.